Hello and welcome. We are joined by Tom Leitch, COO of TreasuryXpress, and we're going to be discussing something that's critical to treasury departments around the world, implementation. He's going to be talking about technology-driven TMS implementations to deploy, to support and scale. So how would you sum up the current situation and the modern situation?
Let's look at what scares some treasurers when looking at a TMS implementation, whether it be a greenfield company coming from Excel onto a TMS or a company changing from historic TMS to a new TMS. I think one of the biggest hurdles and what scares them most is the prospect of having to do a long, lengthy, arduous implementation, whether that be relying upon consultants to help them or doing their full-time job as well as implementing a system. So I think it's a very key area to look at. And I think if you look at the status quo, what scares the treasurers is the lengthy implementation. And what causes this lengthy implementation is probably reliant a lot on the banks. So to get connected to a bank requires, first of all, getting a hold of the right relationship manager and then collecting the paperwork, getting the vendor to complete the paperwork, to create these links, and then testing of the links, and then going live. And sometimes this process, we've seen it when we sort of started this whole sort of project in 2016, taking about 2.5 months, quite a long time, just to receive statements coming in. Of course, some were very quick, but the majority were of that length. So the bank connectivity delay is a large portion of what slows these projects down. And then also, if you look at perhaps some ways of deploying the system, if you look at a module to module implementation, so if I select 4 modules from a vendor, the way that it can be implemented is you have to code each one and link them into each other separately, and that again can lead to issues and length of implementation, because you have to make sure those connections are working, make sure the data is feeding between them, and make sure it's all working. As I say, if one breaks, they may all break, like the old Christmas lights, but hopefully they're running all in parallel. And then I think the final point of what the status quo is of how implementations are done right now is a huge reliance on manual, a sort of human intervention, which isn't incorrect. It's just, if you look at other industries and what's going on, I think there has to be a reliance on technology, automation, and everything we've been talking about in previous chats has to sort of replace a lot of the manual work. And we're going to talk later about some of the use cases we've seen by taking on this. And that sort of leads us on to the modern and digital implementation models. If you look at it, what can be done is automate those heavy reliance on human and manual processes, because a lot of them are repeatable. So let's say if I wanted to create the bank letters, we've found a way to automate that. So all we do is we import an Excel or CSV file, and then it spews out the letters for the client to send and sign to the bank, which saves us about a week if it's many number of accounts. If you look at perhaps importing that data once you've got the bank files, matching it, if there's a huge number of accounts, again, we can save another week there. And a lot of it evolves around one solution of one project. And we've touched on that previous chat, was we don't break the system out. All we do is hide aspects of the same system. So what I mean by that is every client is given the same basic data and system. And what that allows us to do is we know everyone's working on the same system. But if they want to hide different parts, we hide them. But ultimately, it's the same solution we're implementing every time, regardless of what modules they use. So we know it like the back of our hand. We can set it up quickly.
So if you use this new digital implementation model, what results are you achieving?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the 2 cases here, Ancestry we implemented towards sort of start to mid of the year, around sort of March and April time. And that process at the time took us about 7 weeks. It was fairly standard implementation, in some areas quite complex, but majority of it was done, and that took us about 7 weeks. And now the reason that took us 7 weeks, again, was a banking partner they worked with was extremely slow and had to go through what we saw as unnecessary movements to get us these bank files. Now, if you look at that, so if we go to 7 weeks at the first half of 2017 to the very last bit of 2017 when we signed Etihad, that's gone from a 7-week process at a similar scale and product size to a 2-week process. Now, how do we achieve that reduction of 5 weeks? And that again was, we took a serious look at what implementation enhancements could be made, so we automated a lot of it. We then also, throughout the discussion with Etihad, we spoke to them and said, look, on this date, we're going to need these projects from when we sign. Let's get everything in place before that. And then as soon as we have the signature in place, we kick it off. So a lot of the groundwork was done before actually the signature in place. I think that's a lot of it's around trusting clients and forming a real partnership, saying we're prepared to work for you. We know it's going this way, and hopefully the end result will be we work with you, but we're going to get things in place beforehand, and that really helped us reduce the time by 5 weeks to 2 weeks.
So it's not all technology; it's actually getting a more simple and effective process.
That's it. I think it's a lot of it's working smarter and then also relying upon smart technology. And then ultimately, if you're saving these time in implementations, you're ultimately saving a lot of costs. So there's a benefit for treasurers to look at and see what implementation can be done and what can we do beforehand to make this a seamless transition from either Excel or from another system to go live.
So what are the KPIs that allow you to continue to achieve this? What should corporate treasurers be looking for?
And understanding when you're looking at a system or looking at a provider, have a very open discussion with them and see what their implementation ethos is. I mean, some will come with a very complex, rigid plan, which in my eyes doesn't fit all. You want to have a fairly free form implementation scheme, but has milestones. So like collecting the bank information, creating the letters, sending the letters, connecting to the bank. The rest of it can be done by the vendor. So you want to have someone who knows what the milestones are. And like we have in this class here, we have deployment. So what are the KPIs there? It's getting the system set up, receiving the URL, linking to the bank. Then also you have the KPIs of support. Obviously you want to be supported through deployment, but then also through the next level of use of the system. So you want to see at what level do I have support with the TMS provider? What KPIs are there for me to measure this support and continue through deployment to live. And then likewise, the support and deployment carries through into upgrade. So you more or less have a complete cyclical motion of KPIs you want to follow, of making sure it's clear cut, the vendor knows what the milestones are at each different point, and we can track it. So a very open dialogue and a lot of trust is involved as well.
This is where your upgrade process, where you do some of it daily, some of it weekly, is part of this ongoing efficiency. How do you bring it all together? We
bring it together by a clear understanding of what our next 6 months will look like. So from a point of development, we then convey that to the clients on board currently, but also we convey it to the people we're talking to who we hope to be clients. So they can continue to see the evolution. And we've had some customers who doubt, or some prospects who doubted us, saying, you said you're going to have a new, let's say, multi-nettering tool in 2 months' time. We come back and do the second demo 3 weeks later, it's there. And they're amazed by the speed of which we can do this. So it's a very important key of our business is being able to upgrade, but also, of course, being able to maintain and communicate with our clients what this implementation, if even the upgrades are.
I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. 5 weeks and then 2 weeks when you've really got it honed even more effectively. What does this do to the future of TMS?
The future of the TMS. So a very good question. So I'm extremely excited for 2018 and also more excited for the years beyond that. And I think what we're going to see is there's no longer any boundaries to the new way of doing it. What I mean is long implementations, there's no rhyme or reason really why they should be so long. So I think what we're going to see from a benefit of a corporate point of view is many more vendors out there being able to provide a quicker implementation by acting, as I said, smart and using smart technologies and smart processes. So the corporate are going to be able to reduce the time on implementation spent, and obviously that's going to reduce the cost of these systems because they're not spending so long to implement. And I mean, occurrences like PSD2, when this goes live, obviously it's gone live, but banks have a window to test and make sure this is all working. When we have the APIs, that's going to really eradicate all of the wait with the banks. So we should be able to reduce, we've gone from 5 weeks to 2 weeks. The idea is essentially you'll be able to go onto a website, sign up to a TMS, put your APIs into the system, and then you're up and running in 2 days. That's the end goal we want to achieve, and that's what we think is going to happen towards the end of 2018, definitely 2019.
Wow.
Yeah.
I come from an era which people talked in 6, 9, 12 months and beyond.
Yeah, so hopefully, I mean, we've gone from the very long one. I think the longest I've ever heard is 2 years, and our hope is to get that down to 2 days, and that will all have happened hopefully in the space of 5 years. And that's because of the technology being adopted by vendors out there, and also the understanding of technology from the corporate treasurer. There's been a real shift in the acceptance of best-in-class cloud systems or best-in-class technology that's really now energizing the treasury space and making these implementations and systems much quicker and much more seamless and frictionless.
Thank you, Tom. Very interesting.
No, thank you very much, Jack. It's always a pleasure to